Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my 2024 reads that I did. I hit my goal of 10, which I know is not a lot, but I only really started getting back into reading in about like September or so of this past year. So I didn't have a ton of time to fully commit to like 20 plus books, but I'm proud of what I did read and I actually hit my goal. I was worried I wasn't going to hit my goal because I got really stuck on one book in particular that I'll talk about. These were my 2024 reads and I'm excited to start my 2025 reading list and goals. I just wanted to go over what I read this year and kind of it's not really in a particular order, but it's sort of, I think, my definitive ranking for the year. So some of these books I did get from the library, so I won't have a physical copy of them in front of me, but I'll put up a photo. But here is my 2024 ranking of all the books I read, of all 10 books that I read this past year. So let's get into it. Now, I do have a copy of this book, but I didn't want to pull it off my bookshelf because it's kind of in a difficult place to get to. And I didn't really want to necessarily rank it because I have read it before. And the reason I decided to read it again was because it was just something I already had on my shelf. And I wasn't sure if I was going to really be able to get back into reading. I used to hate reading. And this book, Twilight, was one of the few books that, when I was younger, that I actually read. It was the only series really I read growing up because I just hated reading when I was younger. I decided to reread this because I already had it on my shelf. It really helped me get back into it, and then I started reading more and more, and so I've been really enjoying that. But it was interesting, I will say, rereading this book as an adult, because I don't think I've read these since I was in high school, maybe. I think that was the last time I reread them. I think I've read the whole series twice, maybe 2 or 3 times. And yeah, I just decided to reread the first book, and it was, like I said, very interesting to read again because also I remember when I was younger, people made such a big deal of Twilight being very raunchy for young people, and having reread it as an adult, I'm like, this is so tame. I can't even believe that adults actually were scared for their kids to read this book. I know some of the later books, I think, like especially Breaking Dawn, you know, they get married and they have sex. But I think this first book in particular, it was so tame and so mild. I couldn't believe that people really were trying to stop their kids from reading it. So it was interesting to reread as an adult and have a different perspective on it. Also, there was a lot of things in this book that because I've seen the movies much more than I have read the book. My memory of what the book was compared to the movie was totally different. And I was actually shocked at how different the book was from the movie. In my mind, it was like a perfect representation of the book, and rereading it, I was like, wow, there's a lot of differences in the movie and the book that I totally forgot about. So if you're a Twilight fan, or if you grew up watching it or reading the books, definitely give it a reread. It was kind of fun to reread and have I don't know, like I said, a different perspective now being an adult. And the next book I read, like I said, this is in not really any particular order, but if I had to rank this one, it would probably be at the bottom of my list. It is Remarkably Bright Creatures. This book did not hit for me. It's been a pretty popular book. A lot of people have, it's been like a trendy book this year, I feel like. I've seen a lot of people talk about it and say how great it is, so I was like, oh, must be a good book, I'll give it a shot. I was so thoroughly disappointed by this book. There were parts where I got really bored and was over it and just wanted to finish it because I don't know, it just did not click totally for me. There are interesting aspects to this book, like the one thing that I think pulls people in about this book is the perspective of the octopus, which is interesting. However, it is a very, very small part of the book compared to the perspective of, I think his name was Cameron. Sorry, it's been a while since I've read the book. The 2 main characters, and Tova, I think is the other lady's name. It's mostly their perspective, and in my opinion, their characters to me they just didn't evolve in a very satisfying way throughout the book. And by the end, it's just like, you guys are still kind of like these antisocial a-holes. I don't know, maybe not as much Tova, but like definitely Cameron was just, I don't know. It just wasn't a very satisfying ending. I don't know. The only thing that really kept me reading it was just trying to figure out, because it's sort of, there's a mystery aspect to it. So I wanted to know how it ended, but I don't know, just wasn't really satisfying ending to me. I've heard people say that the audiobook was way better because there's like the different narrations for the different characters or whatever, something like that. So if you liked it, cool. It just wasn't totally my cup of tea. It wasn't my favorite book that I read this year. So these next two for me are kind of tied, I guess, near the bottom. This next one I actually have, I'm happy I found it. I went to the thrift store and I found this on the shelf and it was in really good condition. So I read People We Meet on Vacation. I actually just finished this a couple days ago. This was another book that I knew was popular. I know this author in general is pretty popular. I knew it was going to be like a romance, cutesy, girly sort of novel, which is fine. I was really into this book, I feel like at the beginning, and then by the end, it just got predictable and kind of boring. Like I said in my, I have Fable, the app Fable, and I reviewed this and I said, honestly, I feel like this could have been 100 less pages. I just felt like it's unnecessarily long. It's like, I think it's like 360 pages or something like that. I feel like it could have been shorter. It was a little bit steamier than I was expecting this to be. I knew it was like a romance novel, but there is one chapter that is pretty spicy that I was not expecting. Granted, like I said, it's pretty much just one chapter near the end. This was all right. If you like romance novels, this is all right. I've heard she has a couple of, I think Beach Read, I think is a popular one of hers. I know people really like that book. Haven't read it, so I can't speak to that, but people have said this is not their favorite of hers. I also wanted to read this because I know I heard it was being made into a movie, so I figured why not get ahead of it and read it before the movie comes out. Like I said, it's all right. If you like this genre, if you like rom-com sort of books, you'll probably enjoy this, or if you like Emily Henry's writing in general. I just find that books like this tend to be very idealistic, obviously, in their representation of men and how men, it's definitely the female gaze of men. It's definitely what a woman would want a man to behave and act like, not really in reality how men behave or act like. So just take that for what it is. If you like that genre, that's, you know, this will be the book for you probably. It was kind of a little cheesy for me. I will say, like I said, it's kind of a rom-com sort of book. So there were genuinely funny parts of this book that I had myself laughing out loud to. So it is funny, it has its moments. This other book, I know people will probably get mad at me for ranking so low, but I was so fed up with this book by the end of it. I just wanted to finish it. It is Where the Crawdads Sing. This has been a very popular book. My husband really enjoyed it. And it's not that I didn't enjoy it. The beginning was very hard to read for me because Kaya is just so abandoned and so lonely. It was very hard to read about like her being abandoned and being a kid abandoned on her own at such a young age. Like that was very hard to read, and I felt sadness for her. That was very difficult to read. But I don't know why I did not like the writing in this. I don't know what it was. It didn't click for me. It just, I got like, I feel like halfway through this book and I just kind of got bored with it. And I just was really wanting to move on and read something else. I probably should have paused and read something else in the meantime and then came back to this. But I had my reading goal, so I really wanted to just get through it and read it and be done with it. And I will say the mystery of who killed Chase Andrews, which I'm not going to spoil, that was really interesting. The kind of end when you find out what happened and stuff is very interesting. However, like I said, something about the writing just didn't click with me. I don't know, maybe I just, my ADHD was really kicking in with some of these books because those two were not. For me, it's like a book really has to like grip me and I don't know, pull me in. And those ones, it's like, it started off really strong and then I got bored. Maybe that's just my own personal issue because like I said, I have ADHD, so maybe that's just my own problem. Then this next one, I just kind of ranked in the middle because it is a short story. It is The Pearl by John Steinbeck. I just also found this copy at the thrift store. Most of these books I got at the thrift store, actually. This is just an easy, I think it's like not even 100, yeah, it's like 90 pages. So it's not even 100 pages. And I just kind of, I was trying to hit my reading goal, so that's also why I read this, since it was a quick little novella or whatever. It says it's based on a Mexican folk tale, so it's definitely got a kind of a lesson sort of vibe. I feel like I would have benefited almost from, like, I wish I could have gone back in time and like read this in school or something and like have like a class, you know, like I feel like this is a book you want to like, you go slowly through and discuss with people. I don't know, I feel like I would have benefited from reading this in like a class setting or something and discussing it with other people. I got this from the thrift store, and somebody had clearly gotten this for school or something. But it was interesting. The ending is definitely a twist, and it's kind of sad. It's just like it's about like corruption and greed and things like that. So it's an interesting kind of lesson sort of book. So like I said, I just put it in the middle because it was just a quick, easy read. The next book that I also kind of have in the middle because it was good, and I'm excited to read the whole series of this book. I've never read it. I didn't read it when I was a kid or anything, and I feel like I should read it because I also really like the movies, is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. But even though it's written definitely for a child, it is still an enjoyable read. I was surprised how enjoyable it was even reading it now as an adult. It's hard to form an opinion on this. Like, this was a good book, but I feel like reading the whole series will be much more satisfying. So I'm almost debating. I read a copy from the library, and then I found this copy at the thrift store. So I'm almost maybe debating if I should just reread this again before I eventually embark on the whole series, so I kind of refresh my memory. And the next book on my list that I really enjoyed was the Rum Diary by Hunter S. Thompson. I've actually had this book for probably a good 15 years now. I've never read it. It's just been on my shelf. I mostly got it because I used to love Johnny Depp, and he was in the movie The Rum Diary, which I will say the movie I feel like is quite a bit different than the book. I will say there are problematic themes and words, things like that in this book. So if that's not your vibe, I knew what I was getting myself into. So I've never read any of his books, but like, if you know Hunter S. Thompson, you know that there's gonna be something problematic in the book. But overall, I really love this book. I read it pretty quickly. I don't know, it was just very addicting to read. What I like is that the main character, I found it funny because the main character, Paul, he kind of acts as though he wants to like live in the moment and be like less in his head. But then the whole, like throughout the book, there's these long like inner monologues that he's kind of having with himself and his kind of like struggle with getting older. Even though he's still really young, he's like just this like, wow, like what am I doing with my life type of thing, which I think is very relatable, obviously for a lot of people. But I think it's funny throughout, like I said, throughout the book, he's kind of having these inner monologues where he's like overthinking things, but then it's like he fancies himself as this like, you know, in the moment type of person, when in reality it's like, no, you're like a total basket case, like you're so in your head. But like I said, there are some problematic themes to this, so if that will bother you, maybe research or figure that out before you read this. But I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I thought it was a very interesting read, and I really want to read Fear and Loathing, so I'm hoping maybe I can do that this next year. We'll see. So I enjoyed this book. Take that as you will. I know this probably won't be for everybody, but like I said, I had it on my shelf, so I figured I would give it a try. And then the last 3 books that I really enjoyed this year, which I all got from the library, so I don't have physical copies of them. These were definitely my top 3 books that I recommend people read. The first one being The Life Impossible by Matt Haig. While I don't think this book will be everybody's cup of tea because there is some like sci-fi sort of themes to it, it's a little odd. The story's a little odd. However, I think why it was one of my favorites was because I love Matt Haig's writing. This book there were just certain things, and the way he writes is really good and satisfying. So I really enjoyed this book. I recently got the Midnight Library, so I'm very excited to read that as well, because I know that was one of his top books that he wrote. I think he wrote it in like 2020, or it came out in 2020. So I'm really excited to read that book too, because I know that was a very popular one of his. Like I said, I enjoyed this book, but I do think there's it's not something I would necessarily recommend to people because it is a little bit of an acquired taste at the same time. So, and my last 2 books are actually written by the same author, and I love her writing. I hope she comes out with more books like these, because they're just so good. The first one being The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. You really get into the story in a way where you just really get lost in it, and it feels like a real life story that is actually happening, or you're kind of reading almost like a movie, like you can visualize everything that's going on. While I think the character of Evelyn Hugo is very, she has a lot of issues that sometimes make her very hateable, and ultimately you find out stuff about her at the very end of the book, which I won't spoil. But she's a very hateable and lovable character at the same time. I don't know, you just learn her whole life story throughout the book. It's really good. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid. this is a really great book, so I highly recommend it. And my number one book of the year, and this book really set me off into reading this year, because I finished it in like 2 days. It was so good, was Daisy Jones and the Six. I love the way this book was written. It is written like a documentary style where kind of each line is sort of a different person telling their story of the events that happened with this fictional band. It is so good. I highly recommend it. It was my favorite book of the year. I know this came out a few years ago, but highly recommend it. I will say I did watch the Amazon series of this book. Don't watch it unless you really are interested in watching it. It's nothing like the book. The book is so much better. It's so good. It just feels like you're really reading something that actually happened. It's just so good. So I'm hoping Taylor Jenkins Reid comes out with more books like that, because she's really good at writing those like fictional historical books. But yeah, those were my top books of the year. I'm actually reading a book right now that is supposed to be, I saw people recommending it if you liked Daisy Jones, another book that's similar, called Utopia Avenue. And I'm only 15 pages in and I'm really liking it. I'm excited for my 2025 reads, and I guess I'll try to keep updating and maybe making videos on the books I read this year if you like it. And yeah, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!